Yes, I know you can see what I see, but you thought it stopped with a banning of the abortion rights for women and the rights for women to choose what is best suited for their body and their lives and their circumstance. Nope, it doesn't stop there. Texas, in Texas, voting is now an act of civil disobedience. Let me read that again. In Texas, voting is now an act of civil disobedience. This has gone beyond the grain. So this is by Claudia Yoli Furla. Okay? This is sad because this is not what America should be about. However, America has a history, and the very people that are trying to silence individuals are bringing back that old, ugly part of America that people fought so hard to try to resolve and to change. So, with the enactment of what is called Anti-Voter Senate Bill 1 earlier this year, it became clear beyond all doubt that Texas leadership is intent on silencing the voices of the new and diverse generation of Texans. It's so sad. And you know, when one state does something, some states they either regress and they say, no, we're not going to do that, or you'll have others and other countries that'll try to mimic what they see someone else do. And this is not good because it almost makes me feel as though they want to bring back the 40s and 50s when America wasn't that great. And still, we're seeing a lot of things that aren't great. So our leaders would rather put up intentional barriers to the ballot box to silence our voices than take action on real issues affecting working Texans, especially young people of color. Under these circumstances, when the established authority has demonstrated a desire to deter people from voting, the act of voting itself becomes not just our civic duty, but a noble and necessary act of civil disobedience. Okay? But let me be clear. Ours is not a movement limited only to those who can vote. Okay? Even those of us who are denied the franchise because we're too young, or because we're returning citizens, or because we're not citizens at all. So we too have an important role to play. So take it from me as a queer DACA recipient who leads one of the largest youth-powered civic engagement organizations in our state. There's plenty of work to be done outside of punching a ballot. So we change, or we can engage and educate and activate, organize, and empower the people around us to make a real difference in our communities. That's how we build lasting social, cultural, and political power from the ground up. So to fight to stop the Senate bill, is what it's called, one, was long and hard fought. Hundreds of Texans from all walks of life who make up a diverse, multicultural, multi-generational coalition drove for hours across the sprawling state to have their voices heard. They fought to ensure our leaders knew the vast majority of Texans don't support their attacks on our freedom to vote. Okay? So listen to this article, y'all. This sounds like an attack on people's freedom to vote. I've heard this happen as well. And it's happened in other states where they've tried to put up barriers to make it complicated for people to go and vote. They've tried to make it so that they shut and close polling stations. And now this in Texas. And so it just gets worse as it goes along. So the aggressiveness and partisan manner in which the bill was forced into law, ignited widespread outrage against voter suppression on a scale that we have not seen in this country since the civil rights era. You see what I'm saying? They're trying to take it back to there. And I've been seeing it. It's happening in the schools, it's happening in the neighborhoods. Man, this is crazy. So now, that same spirit of defiance, which has throughout history repelled the most aggressive assaults on our freedoms to vote, is again gripping our nation. So you have the pushback from the people that see that this is wrong, straight across the board, and we got to lift our voices, lift ourselves up, and speak out against this. And this is what this group is trying to do. So I want to take a moment to hone in on this point because it is important. It's an important one. So the attacks on the democracy in Texas find their focus at an intersection of race and class, and so any effective response to these racist oppressive measures must in turn have this intersectionality at its center, just as the civil rights movement in the 1960s did a generation ago. So we must be grounded in the radical roots of our movement and remind ourselves that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. spoke about his dream and the future for America. He did so in the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. And this was not just for just Black people, this was for all people that were facing the same issues. So the ability to make our voices heard in this democracy has always been and will be continue to be intrinsically tied to the fight for economic and racial equality as well. And so it's no coincidence, for example, that granting special protections for partisan poll watchers was a key provision in the Senate Bill 1. And the Texas GOP officials were training their largely white supporters to target Latino, or Latinx is how it's pronounced here, and Black communities and Hispanic communities, especially for voter intimidation through the use of poll watchers. So nor is it any coincidence that early iterations of the voter suppression bill referenced the purity of the ballot box, language that was historically used to exclude non-white Texans from the voting process in earlier versions of the Texas Constitution. Okay, so nor that the bill eliminated 24-hour early voting and drive-through voting when communities of colors made up the majority of voters availing themselves of these secure voting options. Proponents of this voter suppression bill gave up the game when they rejected a proposed amendment that would track the impact of the bill across different racial groups. So they knew what they were doing in the beginning, making it hard for people to vote. And those people of color, people who are marginalized. So more recently, Texas lawmakers have now, on dubious constitutional grounds, begun the process of redrawing Texas electoral districts based on decennial census data. So this data showed that 95% of the growth of Texas saw over the past decade was driven by communities of color. Nonetheless, Texas lawmakers have shamelessly proposed racist maps that deliberately dilute the political power of Black and brown communities. The numbers are astonishing. While white and Latinx Texans make up virtually identical proportions of the state's population, the new map draws out and include 23 districts with white majorities and just 7 Latinx minorities or majorities, and 1 fewer Latinx majority district, and 1 more white majority district than the current map. And so they have drawn maps on who's to vote and whose votes count. Similarly, the new maps include 0 majority Black districts, removing the single existing majority Black district from the current map. So it truly is hard to contemplate a more blatantly racist attempt to stack the deck of cards against communities of color. So the common thread here that connects all of these assaults on freedom of voting is their deliberate, disproportionate impact on Black and brown Texans. So the only way to fight back against these measures is to leverage the power of these communities by engaging and educating and organizing, mobilizing, and empowering the passionate Texans, our Texan people that make up against the oppressive power over these communities that cynically our cynical politicians are desperately trying to retain. So bad actors know how much power our communities have. Why why else would they be trying so hard to keep the people out of this process? So Texas leadership has gone to an extraordinary length to cut out communities of color through that process. So the upshot, however, is that we have the power to change the system, the power to seek to that they seek to silence them by setting out to engage communities of color by educating Black and brown communities, Texans, all over in those areas to empower people all across the state, we can undo the damage done to the democracy. But it's going to take lots of hard work, and we're going to have to realize the right to vote is not just a freedom we enjoy, but an obligation that we have to one another. So we're going to have to build up and empower people from all walks of life, even those of us who cannot vote, because this fight is our fight too. And we're going to have to embrace fully that enduring spirit of defiance and civil disobedience that has time and time again changed the course of history. So it's sad that I'm even having to have to read about what's going on because I wanted to make these things known because I know some people might have been aware of this. Not everybody is because when some people or young people don't feel like it affects them, when something that they want to do or something that means something to them or is significantly happening in their lives where these things take place, and it impacts them in some type of way, then they want to know, why is this happening? Well, it starts with things like this, issues like this, school board meetings that get out of control when kids can't read literature about history, a true history, when you find people trying to make it hard for you to go anywhere to vote, people make it hard for you to live anywhere. It's all kinds of things that are happening, y'all. And I don't know that everybody really sees this, but I'm bringing some of these things out because it is happening. Sometimes it seems like it happens overnight, like somebody's just writing and they're making laws, or they're talking to one another, and they're in their board meeting and they're trying to divvy up, okay, what laws can we make up to stop these people from advancing and creating change? And so this is what you see, and it's sad, but it's true. This is what's happening in our world today. And you wonder when this is going to ever, come to an end. It just seems like there's one thing after another. And it all seems to go into the effect that people want things the way they used to be, and that is a history that people have worked so hard to change, to make better for a lot of people. And somehow you got these people, they want to reverse things. They want to make new laws, but these new laws are not actually new. They're old laws that were turned around, and they're trying to reverse things back to the way they were, like the 40s, the 50s, the 60s. All this abusiveness, all these things that silence people, or they take away folks' rights, or they make it hard for people to live in certain communities, or it hurts people, and it usually hurts the most people who are oppressed, and they have been through enough, you think, but no, it just doesn't stop. It doesn't end there. So when will this end? We don't know, but it's important for us to lift our voices up and speak out on these issues and see what's going on in our world, because it is going to affect each and every one of us at some point, especially when it has to do with voting rights. Just simple things that you think people take it for granted. They're trying to change those things and make it harder for people to even use their rights. Yeah, this is bad. Something's got to be done about it.